Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, digital sports producer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and I am joined today by Jason Mackey, our Pirates beat reporter, for some more Pirates hot stove talk. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. It is now officially baseball season, I guess, right? Like the Steelers lose and the next sport to start. I don't know. I'm reaching a little bit. It's more shift attention to hockey, but I don't know. I'm excited for spring training. I'm ready to get down there, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to be that too far now. We can measure it in weeks instead of months, so it's
Right.
getting close. We're going to talk plenty of Bryan Reynolds because I'm sure that's what the folks want to hear about. Lots of news on him last week. But before we get into that, just a reminder: if you're joining us for the first time, please pop a like on this video. Help us out with the YouTube algorithm. Please also subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our daily videos. As Jason mentioned, we're going to still have a lot of Steelers postseason talk here. Maybe get into some NFL very early NFL draft talk. Maybe some more college football as the week goes along too. So make sure you're subscribed for that. And also, please check out the subscription deal down in the description. $6 for 6 months of access to postgazette.com. At this point, that's going to get you through spring training. It's going to get you up to the NFL draft. It's going to get a lot of important stuff. So make sure you check that out. With that, Jason, I want to get into the Bryan Reynolds talk. First of all, has any movement happened from your reporting in terms of what teams are offering? Are we any closer to a deal than when I talked to you about 2 weeks ago?
No, we're not. And I mean, you're seeing stuff trickle out. And John Heyman tweeted or wrote, I think it was in the New York Post, 6 years and around 75 or upwards of $75 million. I can confirm that, number one. I wrote about that on Saturday about, you can kind of look at what we know about fewer years than Hayes, more money. Like the Pirates aren't going to jump from 70 to 90 million on a contract. But I guess that's a longer way of saying there hasn't been any movement. The Pirates, they're getting calls, they're talking to people, certainly that. But I mean, their asks are very high, as they should be. This is a strategy right now. Like they're not going to let him get away for nothing, nor should they. They're not in a position to trade him. I think they don't want to appear as if they're like acquiescing to a trade demand and saying like this is going to, set a precedent or something like that. If somebody says they want to be traded, then the Pirates immediately ship them off. For that reason, like I do expect them to wait into spring. I do think because of the interest that they could make a move before the season. That would not shock me at all. Worst case scenario, I think at the deadline, somebody probably gets crazy and makes them an offer. But for right now, there's not a bunch of news.
I wanted to ask about, okay, there's a high ask, but also, they're not going to budge on, the numbers we're talking about on the open market are like 1.5 wins above replacement for season is what they'd be paying for. I wanted to ask you specifically about how you can value him that much at the negotiating table, with his agent. And then on the other hand, say, well, we want a sky high demand for this guy. How can you ask other teams to pony up, 2-3 top prospects and then say, well, we think he's a 1.5 player when you're trying to, keep him here for the long term? That just doesn't square with me.
No, I get you. And I think part of it is you can ask for it. It doesn't mean you're going to get it. Now, I mean, you should ask for a lot, right? Like you're holding the asset, you have leverage. You should ask for a lot. And maybe somebody's crazy enough to pay it. Now, I would say you do a lot of evaluating based on WAR, and I don't have any problem with WAR. I'm not disagreeing with WAR. I'm just saying that there's probably more interpersonal things here where the Pirates are going to value a certain type of prospect at a certain level to fill a certain hole because that's an important part of their roster construction. And it's not just about WAR. I mean, another part of Reynolds, this isn't sort of reflected in WAR, but having years of club control remaining, having an established salary. We know what he's going to make this year, next year, and the year after, at least within a pretty good range based on arbitration. And for teams that are actually spending money and building rosters to have his production at a set value, that matters. Now, does it matter to the point where like the Pirates can hold out hope and say like, we want 3 top 50 prospects, which they're obviously not going to get? No, I mean, that's where sort of the logic and the interpersonal stuff comes in. But I think this is just the way those things go, right? Like the Pirates are going to ask for the moon. They're not going to get the moon. And so they're going to have to settle for something that's, reasonably close.
Yeah, I want to attack this maybe from a different angle too, which is, for me, you're asking for a lot, and then you're going back to the negotiating table with him. Let's move it away from WAR, and let's just say, um, you know, they don't seem to value him, so he's going to hit free agency, and he's probably going to get traded with a year or two left, of arbitration, because that's how this works. The Pirates have never kept a guy. Who was a meaningful player, maybe some players who were more role guys. They've never kept a meaningful player through his last arbitration eligible year here. I wrote about that last year. They jettisoned them with a year or two left. So all of these teams know you don't want to keep him because that's where you're valuing him.
Right.
And we know you're going to have to trade him probably within the next year. I guess, again, that just comes to the question of how much leverage do the Pirates actually have here? And the longer they wait, don't they diminish whatever leverage they do have?
Yeah, I mean, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think part of the reason why they're not seeing guys through the arbitration process, and that's unfortunate, but you're in a position where you're not winning and you're trying to mortgage what little assets you do have for the future. I think that would change if they're able to figure out a lot of the stuff underneath those decisions, meaning, drafting, development, all that crap that we've talked about a lot. But, you know, I don't know. I mean, I go back and forth on whether this even makes sense for them, Adam. I mean, you can make a very strong case that the Pirates should just trade Bryan Reynolds right this instant. I don't necessarily agree with it. Like, I would much rather see them spend actual money, give him an actual contract, and do business the way most of the rest of Major League Baseball does. I don't think that's going to happen. So, if you operate within reality and sort of how they've done business under Dunning's ownership in its entirety, which again, a lot of people are going to disagree with, and I don't blame them. But a case can be made that it's just best to trade him right now and maintain the years of club control that are important to other teams. And you just start over and you basically say, this is the cycle, right? Like, we need to nail talent, get it up here for years of 0 to 3. And then when you get into ARB, you need to like maximize the window that the Pirates have. And some of the guys that like O'Neill Cruz, when they're early on in that, you need to extend them. But I don't know. To me, it's too late in the game to do anything other than Reynolds than trade him.
Yeah, Jason, I think that makes sense to me in terms of, it's the maximum leverage you have now. And to me, if this is the offer you're going to present in a negotiation, it's not a serious negotiation because it's not a serious valuation of Bryan Reynolds. And that's really the only place that I'm coming at it from WAR, is that it's not a serious valuation. The entire industry knows it. So a lot of this just feels like theater for me.
In what way?
Go ahead.
No, in what way? Like, in what way do you say it feels like theater? I'm not questioning it. Like, there are very, very clearly people who feel differently about this, and that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. But like, how do you view it as theater?
I just feel like it's not a serious offer, and it's one of those things that Pirates fans are going to know that, even if because I think John Heyman talked about it in terms of it would be a record contract for the Pirates, and that might be true, but that doesn't mean that means anything necessarily when it's not a serious offer for the player in question. And I think that's the source of frustration. And I'll ask my next question this way:
Yeah.
If that's the way you're going to approach things with Bryan Reynolds, at this stage, I get that it's a different stage and it might be too late. And some of these other guys we might be talking about, specifically O'Neill Cruz, but maybe players that come later in this rebuild, maybe you get to them early and maybe it's a different conversation. Maybe you do things that you didn't do with Bryan Reynolds. But if this is the offer they're going to present to Bryan Reynolds, what does that mean for the contours of future negotiations for anyone who's not like kind of a super young prospect that's going to hit free agency at 27, 28? More of these guys are going to hit, around 30, like Bryan Reynolds will. If you're not in that super early window of getting a promotion and having those higher value years being in your 20s, what does that mean?
It means they don't spend a lot of money. Breaking news. I don't know if anybody needed that reminder, but they got it with the Bryan Reynolds situation. No, I mean, the thing with the Reynolds deal, Adam, I mean, like, their time to do this was after 2019 or 2020, and they didn't do it. And like, I understand why probably after 2019, if you're Ben Cherington, like, you don't commit that to that. Like, I know everybody will look at it right now and say, oh, look at Reynolds 2021. Look at what he did in 2022. That data wasn't available after 2019. And Ben Cherington came into this having little idea what Bryan Reynolds was like as a player other than seeing from a distance what he did in 2019. So you're not going to hand him the biggest contract in franchise history at that point. I sort of get it. I mean, I get it from Reynolds' perspective. Like they came at him in 2020. I don't think it was with a terribly serious offer. But if you're Reynolds, why the heck would you sign that? And so it's been a difficult time sort of establishing value, which is what I wrote on Saturday. And I don't know. One of the reasons why I asked you that and why I think people have this opinion, they view that offer to Reynolds as not serious. And I don't understand why that exists. I mean, was it an offer that makes sense for Reynolds to sign? Probably not. But I have a tough time saying it was theatrical or not serious. Like Sean Murphy gets basically the same amount of money, actually gets less. I mean, Sean Murphy plays a different position, achieves value different ways, and yes, was below Reynolds. But I don't think it was that far below it that it's theatrical or a bad offer. It's an offer that for them, given how they do business, which is cheap for lack of a better term, and on the cautious side. And I understand why you're going to go about doing that right now. They're not going to overextend themselves. And so that's kind of what we learned. And it's just given the fact that they waited, given where the Pirates are at, they're not winning right now. It didn't work out. I would hope that the next time this comes around, it does. And I think another lesson to be learned is what you're talking about with O'Neal Cruz. The time to strike is now, or Andy Rodriguez, or somebody else, a talented young player. If somebody breaks through, you need to get that deal done now if you are going to extend guys, because chances are the way Reynolds has gone about achieving his value and given his age and contract status and all this stuff, no, they aren't going to retain a lot of those guys because that's not the model that they're working in. And people will criticize that and hate that. And I understand that. And I'm not defending it saying like, oh, this is perfect. It's not. But I think there's some nuance here that people need to understand.
Yeah, I think I'd complete that square this way and say, let's define this in terms of the Ke'Bryan Hayes contract. It was rich. B, I think if you were Ke'Bryan Hayes going into that negotiation and looking at his production, particularly with his glove, he knows he hasn't been a finished product at the plate. But he signed a deal knowing that if I just play good defense for the terms of this contract, it's going to pay off for the Pirates. And I'm willing to give them the upside of whatever I'm able to do with the bat. I think the problem with Bryan Reynolds is he's already shown that upside. And this is probably more to your point that the Pirates just aren't going to pay for that. But the reason I say not serious is, going back to the WAR comparison, it's a 1.5. And we know he's a better player than that. We know he's probably going to be a better player like that into his early 30s. And so I don't think there's any argument to be made that he was ever going to sign it in any universe, because he'd be, I think, cutting his value by as much as 50%.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that standpoint. And another thing, just to keep referencing this, good or bad, like you can draw a comp to Matt Olson, for instance. Like it's similar amount of time, 8 years, 168 million, and I believe that's one of the contracts that like came up in debating this between the two sides. And like right now, Reynolds through 4 years of his career is averaging more WAR per year than Olson has. So why right now would you sign an $80 million contract? Let's just say what that is versus, I'm going to go. I'm just going to keep going to ARB, and then, it's going to pay off for me in the long run of betting on myself. And then on the other side of this, it's not going to be Pittsburgh, but somewhere they're going to pay me between 140 and 160 million over the next 8 years. And if I just don't sign this, I could achieve $60 more million or something like that in value. And I don't blame him one bit for doing that. But I also understand the Pirates side of it when we say, man, I really don't think it's the smartest move business-wise to be paying a 35-year-old outfielder $16.25 million or whatever it works out to. We should probably be turning over contracts like that and be spending that money on somebody else that we got at sooner. So, I mean, you just say, this doesn't totally work for us. This doesn't totally work for us. We move on.
Yeah, I guess my only counter to that would be, do you know you're going to get a player better than Bryan Reynolds in this window? And I don't think that that's a guarantee. I think he's a guy who's gotten MVP votes. It's very possible there's no one in this system that's going to get MVP votes. So, and that's not a commentary on the system. That doesn't mean the Pirates can't win. It's just, you don't know how many you have the asset now. And to me, if you're not going to keep it, that's one one thing. It's one thing to not keep Bryan Reynolds for the long run. It's another to not like even try. And I kind of feel like that's where a lot of Pirates fans are, is that yeah, we can logic through this a little bit, but at the end of the day, they're not really trying to keep him. And they're not giving it a chance for him to say, okay, I'm going to take this discount and stay here. Kind of like Andrew McCutchen. They're not giving him a chance to sign an Andrew McCutchen deal, because I don't look at this offer as an Andrew McCutchen Marvel thing.
Deal.
What'd you say?
They've offered him more money than the Andrew McCutchen deal.
Yeah, but that was a decade ago. Inflation. I mean, it's not the value of the contract that we're talking about here is definitely not the same value as what Andrew McCutchen signed in 2012.
Yeah. I mean, what did Kutch sign? 55? Is it 55?
I think it was 50.
Is it 50? Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about $30 million. And there's an extra year. I don't know, man. I mean, it's a Pirates contract. I'm not sitting here and explaining it like it's the greatest contract that ever lived. Believe me. But like I'm saying, I understand where the Pirates are coming from. And I'm saying they should have got this done sooner. Completely fair criticism. And I'm saying that in a couple of years, I would hope you need to figure out the other parts of this and like continue the ascent that, that we're at the very bottom stages of that. We're not at the top of the roller coaster, but you know what I mean? Like it should look different the next time something like this comes up with years of winning and success and whatever. I mean, it's not impossible. It's just, I don't know. But I also understand why people get mad at it. Like you want to see your best player retained, right? Like if you can't do that, what are you doing here? I get that side of it. So like most things with the Pirates, I have two people fighting in my brain. It all depends on which one wins.
Yeah, I feel ya. Anyway, Jason, I also want to talk about the Rich Hill signing. We have not gotten into that. I do not like it. I wrote as much last week, saying that it gave me major Matt Morris, Jeff Suppan like vibes of going out and getting an innings eater that might make a bad team better, but that is also ultimately not changing the course of the franchise. And you and I are sitting here talking about 30 million, like, it's the biggest difference in the world. But here's Rich Hill, born during the Jimmy Carter administration, getting $8 million. I just kind of want to talk about this in terms of kind of the, what I wrote about, which is that it feels a lot like 2003, which was a year when the Pirates were not coming off a couple rough years and decided to sign a bunch of free agents to make the team better. But it wasn't good enough. Reggie Sanders was a guy who had 31 home runs. They had Kenny Lofton. He was pretty good. Pokey Reese was not signed that offseason, but he was a similar acquisition of, definitely a short-term veteran guy who was not going to be here for the long run. I feel like the Rich Hill signing I wasn't feeling that before about this offseason, but once they signed Rich Hill, I very much got those vibes. I'm going to give you a chance to tell me why I'm wrong.
I mean, I can't predict the future. I don't know, but I don't have an issue with the Rich Hill signing. And here's why I guess I would defend it, Adam. I mean, believe me, I would rather see them spend multiple years, get a pitcher in here for multiple years, somebody, Jose Quintana or whomever, believe me. But like, given the situation, I don't have an issue with it. I think it's interesting how the Rich Hill signing is perceived everywhere else than in Pittsburgh. Like everywhere else, it's, oh, cool, Rich Hill's still pitching. Oh, can you believe that? Oh, man, why didn't he go to Boston? He winds up in Pittsburgh. Oh, Rich Hill, that's fun. Look at his curveball. Here, it's, what in the world? They stink. What are the Pirates? What's wrong with the Pirates? This is the dumbest signing ever. Like, there's so much more negativity here, and I don't necessarily understand that. I mean, if you would give me somebody who had a 3-something ERA over the past 7 or 8 seasons, which is what Rich Hill has, my first question to you would be, why is he signing with the Pirates? And then, okay, you're going to tell me he's 42. He's going to be 43 in March. I get it. I don't have a magic indicator to say that he's going to hit that cliff this year. I mean, sure, the odds go up with every year in his career. It's a bet the Pirates are taking. The dude wants to keep playing. He does what he needs to do to keep playing. He's got a terrific mindset. The way he's pitching, that's certainly sustainable. That's like Pirates fans. Are they going to walk over and tell us that Adam Wainwright can't pitch either? They've made that determination, but we've made the determination that Rich Hill can't pitch. Based on what? I don't know. the fact that I guess he pitches for the Pirates, so that makes it a dumb signing for the Pirates. I don't get that. Now, are they going to trade him? Obviously, yes. But could the money be spent in other ways? Yes. And I know that's part of your argument, but when you look at this, Rich Hill is not going to make his full allotted money. He's going to make half of it or less. And then to me, you're basically advertising for what you're doing. Rich Hill knows everybody and everybody's cousin. So if Rich Hill comes here, has a good experience, generates a good story, he's going to tell people. People are going to pay attention to it because, hey, look at Old Man River pitching at PNC Park. That's great. Like, theoretically, if this goes well, this is going to be a sign that the Pirates are doing something right, and that a veteran who's been around here, who's had other options, chose to come to Pittsburgh, and it worked out. I don't know if it will, but that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I don't think my criticism is that I think Rich Hill's going to be bad. I think there are some people that are making that argument. I'm not in that camp. When I compared him to Jeff Suppan was pitched to a 3.5 ERA here in 2003, and they got some prospects for him. And, I think that's a very possible outcome. So I'm not kind of attacking it from that perspective. I'm attacking it more from the level of what if I'm sitting here watching a Rich Hill start in May. Why am I supposed to be excited about that? You know what? Like where? Let's say he twirls a gem, like allows 2 runs, beats the Cardinals in May. We've been conditioned for so long at this point to be kind of looking toward the future, and this is the absolute antithesis of that for Pirates fans. And I think if you're going to get people in a rebuilding mindset, to then add someone who is definitely not coming, I think like J.A. Happ was a guy who. You could have seen him coming back, right? He was young enough that the Pirates could have signed him to a second contract. Francisco Liriano signed to a second contract. Some of these pitchers that are veterans, but not like 43-year-old veterans, you can make an argument that if it works out here, there's potentially a future. I don't see that with Rich Hill, and I think that is the level that I think some people who are a little more forward-focused would criticize it from.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why he still can't have an impact during his time here, though. And what I mean by that, like he can still talk to Mitch Keller, JT Brubaker, Roansy Contreras, or Johan Oviedo, Luis Ortiz, Mike Burrows, Quinn Priester. Like he can still impact those guys. He can still impact the clubhouse and talk about how it's done in winning organizations, how it's done in Boston or LA or Chicago or any number of places that Rich Hill has been. I mean, the Pirates, and I look at this, I bring this comparison up a lot, Adam, like how the Penguins dressing room operated and policed itself during my time on that beat. And it's a veteran, well-led, well-constructed group. When Patrick Hornquist was here, and then how Evgeny Malkin, Sidney Crosby, Chris Letang, how they handled business. You can't say enough good things, right? Well, you have to grow into that. You have to have guys that know how that happens. The Pirates have been lacking those guys. They have. And like Carlos Santana helps. Rich Hill helps. That is a component of playing sports at a professional level that is not to be discounted. That is not something that, you can fully learn without experiencing it. So Rich Hill does add value there. Theoretically, he should rub off positively on teammates. I don't know. I mean, I understand people that want to see that money going to other places. I don't see it as a waste with Rich Hill. I see it as, okay, this is a stop along the way. We can still be future focused. This should help the future. It's just, probably a step that people don't necessarily want to take because they say, I want to see Quinn Priester here now. I want to see Mike Burrows here now. And I get all that, but it just doesn't happen just because you promote them and somebody sprinkles magical dust on them and they come up here and produce. I'm not saying you think that, but I think there's a perception that that's just automatic.
Yeah, well, and I think for me, Vince Velasquez kind of falls in the he finds it falls in the realm of what I see to be okay, veteran guy, falling on hard times. Maybe we can fix him. Maybe we can trade him for something. Maybe we can keep him here. It's just, I think for me, there's just no future here for Rich Hill. And I can see what you're saying with him. We've had that same conversation about Carlos Santana. We've had the same conversation about Austin Hedges. And at a certain point, how many of those guys can you sign for that amount of money before you say, well, then why can't your coaches do some of this? Isn't that what this great development staff is supposed to be for? Do you really need this number of veterans to be coming in this short period of time for a team that, let's face it, it's probably not going to be very good anyway. That's kind of the place that I'm coming from with that. Let me ask you this, Jason. Do you think there's any pressure on the Pirates front office to show improvement this season? And do you think that that's
Oh yeah.
part of why these signings are being made? I don't think this is going to happen, but let's just say hypothetically, the Pirates lose another 100 games. Would there be pressure on this front office at that point? Or what's the calculus here in terms of what this front office has to show this year?
I mean, there better be pressure. There better be action. Something better happen if they lose 100 games again, man. I mean, that's not acceptable. It's just not. I mean, they went into this knowing it was going to take a while. Okay, it's taken a while. Like, there better be progress this year. How that manifests itself, I think it touches each person differently. Like Travis Williams, his job has been to put butts in seats. Butts have not been in seats. Butts have not been in seats because there has not been a winning product. There's sort of been reasons why there's been no winning product. I understand them. I'm not making excuses for them, but like, this is a calculated thing. The Pirates are not the first team to take it on the chin for a couple of years. But I mean, eventually they start to turn. The Astros start to turn. Orioles start to turn. Like, you have to start seeing progress this year. I mean, you just do. I think right now, fans are agitated. I think the worst thing that can happen is they turn apathetic. And I think that's probably what you risk, where people just say, oh, God, you're always rebuilding. Get out of here. And like, I realize a lot of people say that now. I deal with it on a daily basis, believe me. But like, those that have given this rebuild a legitimate chance, they deserve to see some results on the field. And so I think that's part of this. I also think it's part of how this stuff happens, Adam. I mean, they went out and added in these places where they didn't have internal options. First base, that didn't work out. So they addressed it externally. You need more pitching. They addressed it a little externally. Catching. Henry and Endy aren't quite there, so they addressed it externally. And they got a guy that should theoretically, I think, at that position more than others, be able to mentor those guys. So, I mean, part of it is this is how this stuff works. And part of it is, like we have to do something because our fans are going to tune us out or not buy tickets or, do things that don't make the business end of it work.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's where things are. And that's kind of why I draw the parallel to 2003 is that I think there was similar energy with Dave Littlefield at that point in time. And we saw that year. And I don't think the lasting impact of that was dramatically terrible. I think you and I talked about this a little bit off air. I think the more concerning thing for me has been you're pointing out that there aren't internal options and not like bona fide prospects, like not even guys that you can kind of squint and see, like, let's give this guy a shot for a couple of months before, Endy Rodriguez and Henry Davis show up. Like, we don't even have an external, like quad A catcher that can come up and go down and kind of handle that role of being like the veteran. You don't have a Jacob Stallings type, I guess is the best way to say it. An organizational depth guy that can handle the job and keep that seat warm. And I think that's the big concern for me 3 years into this is that there's a lot of places where we're having these conversations, and that feels like a warning sign for the future.
I don't know if I agree with that because, I mean, I understand what you're saying about wanting a catcher to be able to keep the seat warm. I think I would rather lack that and have two young kids who I think can come up and, like, I've got pretty good faith that either Endy or Henry is going to be a decent major league player. So one of those two, I'll make that bet is going to work out to be okay. And even looking at first base, like, okay, it kind of stinks at the major league level that they didn't get much production from that position, but I don't know about you. I'm okay with Malcolm Nunez. Like, I'll hear him out. I want to see what he has. I didn't hate that trade. I still think Jared Triolo could be an option over there. There's a lot of places you can put somebody. I mean, even if it winds up being O'Neal Cruz, I don't think it would be, but I mean, you can find an option there. They've got some guys in the outfield. They've got some pitchers. They've got some, yes, you always want more. I'm not sitting here saying that the Pirates minor league system is the greatest thing ever, but I don't know if I can say that, because they don't have a stopgap catcher right now, or because they don't have a stopgap option at first base, everything sucks. Like, they went out and had to make those signings. And I think other teams go through that where they say, okay, we don't have a reliable option right now. This is a way we can make this position better until the young kid comes up. Like that. That's a team building concept that is repeated in other places. Maybe they all screw up. I don't know. I'm not saying that they're all going to work out, but I get the methodology there.
Yeah, I get the methodology too. I think the source of frustration, if I'm speaking for myself, and I think some Pirates fans would be like, you go up against the Cardinals every year and they call up a guy that you'd never heard of, and he hits, and it maybe just needs a short period of time. But they have that basic competence at that AAA level that those guys can kind of fill in until those top prospects arrive. And I think this was to be fair to Ben Cherington, I think this was a fair criticism during the Huntington era too, where you had the big names that everyone knew, but they never really got those guys that surprised you. And I guess at this point we would just like to see, more of those guys that surprise you, if that makes sense.
No doubt. I get that. And I mean, I think it's been a mixed bag so far, right? Like you've had Cal Mitchell has come up and been good at times and been not very good at times. I think you can make the argument Luis Ortiz, Roansy Contreras, and Neil Cruz have come up and had a pretty profound impact on the team. Rodolfo Castro has been very good at times, and he's been terrible at times. He's done stupid stuff that's shown he isn't ready. Travis Swagger, they seem to not care whatsoever for, and that's probably not good for a first-round pick, albeit not one of this regime. Like, you need to see more cases of guys coming up and showing a pretty good transitions in the major leagues. And this year I look at Priester, Burrows, Triolo, Colin Selby, guys like that they need to come up here and get established immediately, because that's what the Cardinals do well. That's what other organizations that are better than the Pirates do well. They complete that final step, and that was an issue for the Pirates under the last regime. I mean, that's why that trade with Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows and all that stuff was even made possible. Like, they couldn't complete the development of those players. So I don't know how this regime is going to fare with that. I don't think we have enough data, but I do think it's an important part of doing this. I understand why people look at the Cardinals and get upset, because the Cardinals are so darn good at it, and the Pirates could be good at it, and that's not something that costs $50 million. I think the Pirates have taken a lot of steps to fix it, but we just don't have a final answer yet.
We will probably not have a final answer for some time, Jason, but it's always fun to do these debates, kind of take the good cop, bad cop approach. I think I think these are healthy conversations, and this is the time to have them, because, we still got a long way to go until opening day. So might as well chew the fat while we can, right?
That's right. I don't mind it. I like it. It warms me up a little bit. Makes me think of spring training.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for us today, everyone. Like I said, we'll have more Steelers talk this week. Christopher Carter will be back with the North Shore Drive on Wednesday. Not sure who his guest's going to be, so stay tuned to see who he lines up for that. And we might have some more college football talk here, kind of wrapping up the season. So, Jason, thanks for stopping by, and I'll look forward to more Pirates talk soon.
All right, man. Take care. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.